Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Condo Solutions. Every Monday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock, we talk about some of the things that happen in condos and homeowners associations that might have an impact on you, some of the things that you need to be aware of or need to look out for, maybe some of the things you might have questions about. We're here as a community service program, so as usual, every week you can call in if you've got a question or something that's on your mind. 772-220-9788. That's 772-220-WSTU is the number in the studio, 9788. And you can call in and we'll be happy to get you on the air. My name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a CPA and have been practicing in the area of condos and HOAs for about 25 or 30 years now. And I'm a licensed community association manager and have been involved in that area for a while. And along with us is Peter Mullengarden. Peter's been part of the program since the beginning. He's got 35 or 40 years worth of experience in condos and HOAs, and is a member of the Florida Bar and a specialist in the area, and has provided assistance to homeowners associations and condo associations now for a number of years, and been has experienced a lot of issues, a lot of different things to look at. So we've got a good background to help you with your questions. A couple things we would mention is that when you do call in, we need something to call you. So give us a name. We don't care. We're not checking it. We're not doing background checks. So we just need a name. And we don't need your association because, like we say all the time, sometimes the problems are similar among associations, but not exactly the same. And we may be addressing an issue that maybe for somebody is the same answer, and they may tune out if they don't think it's their association because they might not think it's their problem. So like I said, we don't need the association name, but we do need your problem. We'll be happy to get it and address it the best we can. I would also mention that we have when you call in, we're going to like I said, we're going to deal with your problem, but we don't have your documents. So we just always warn that if you need a real legal, hard and fast answer that you need to be, you're going to go to court on, you really need to contact somebody like Peter, who's got some experience in the industry, and sit down with them, let them look at your documents, and then kind of make a determination because, as I say, the documents can override the law and can override some of the regulations and those kind of things, or they can be conflicting. And so you have to know in the hierarchy of things which documents are going to prevail. And so from that standpoint, it's good to talk to an attorney directly or talk to somebody like Peter directly. But we will give you the best answer we can based on your interpretation of the documents and the information you provide us. We'll give you the best information that we can give you. We caution you though that we will talk sometimes a little broader, so be patient with us. If you're, it might not be exactly this, the same as your issue, but we may be trying to, cover some of those borderline issues that come up that may not be yours, but some other individual might. So again, the number in the studio is 220-9788. That's 220-WSTU. We'll be happy to take your call. Good morning, Peter. How are you?
Good morning, Mark. I'm well. How are you?
Good. It's interesting. We were having our kind of a COVID discussion yesterday. Last Monday, about, handling things in this lawsuit down south. And I tell you, I had a meeting. I had a meeting last week, business owners, and we were talking about the same thing. And it's very, very difficult right now. In fact, Evan and I were talking about it a little bit off the air here just before we started, that it's so right now there's so much stuff going on that it's very hard to figure out as a business, for example, and of course condos and HOAs are businesses. It's very hard to figure out what to do on some of these things. And I know it seems like it would be easy, well, you just quarantine for a period of time, or you get a test or whatever. And but it is very, very difficult. And then because of the time it takes to get the results on the tests and frankly, how many people you've been in contact with, and the rules on that have changed a little. Um, it's it's very difficult to figure out how long, if somebody's negative but they're near somebody that's positive, how long do you quarantine them? And then frankly, the last legislation that went through was supposed to have protection in it for businesses, but that was removed. There's those attorneys again, Peter, those trial attorneys. They got that removed from the bill, so that and so there's already some lawsuits starting to crop up, and I know a number of businesses are a little worried. We've seen one of my friends said he's already seen some posturing by one of his employees. A comment about, well, I didn't know so and so had it. You should have let me know. I'm worried that this business is putting me at risk. Those kind of comments, and it's a problem for businesses, and it's a problem for others because uh, you can't let somebody know who's got it because now you're potentially violating the HIPAA laws. So it's a really difficult situation. And then what do you do? Like I've got a friend who's got a business, and um, their employee tested negative. They don't have it. They tested negative, but they live with two people who are positive, who have tested positive. So, do you let them come to work? Um, if you don't let them come to work, and these are small businesses, so they can't afford to pay them if they're sitting home for 10 or 12 or 14 days. They just don't have the money, and they don't have to. But it's at the same time, you don't want to keep the person from working so that they can make a living, and yet you don't know what to do because they're not. You can say, well, you got to have a negative test. Well, they got two negative tests, but so they come back because every day they go home, they're going around somebody that's positive, and so then how long do you quarantine for the positive person? And then even what is that? Can you get tested? I know when I tried to get a test at Cleveland Clinic, they would not let me take the test, even though I had potentially been in contact with somebody, and frankly, they told me my definition of it didn't meet the criteria. But they told me that even though I'd potentially been in contact, I had to wait 5 days from the date that I first had symptoms, and a lot of people are asymptomatic on this stuff. The first day I had symptoms, I had to wait 5 days. So even though I potentially came in contact with the person on Tuesday of one week, I had to wait till Saturday of the next week, not the next Saturday, but the Saturday of the next week before I could get tested. Um, and of course, for me, that was through the holidays, through Christmas, through everything else. So and now what about the people I came in contact with during the period of time? Do I have to quarantine then from that first exposure? So now I start quarantining from that Tuesday. Well, I'd have been done 10 days. I'd have been out of there. There's no use being tested at that point. I did get tested, but so it's a struggle, Peter. I don't know what, and I think it's going to be a problem for HOAs and condo associations. And the interesting thing is that your insurance doesn't cover this stuff either as a business owner. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, there is some legislation that's I believe it's being introduced in the Florida legislature to try to protect businesses, including not-for-profit associations or not-for-profit corporations, from liability, from lawsuits, or from what they consider to be frivolous lawsuits related to COVID-19. This is very new. I haven't read it yet. I've heard about it. I think it was introduced, or they're trying to introduce it. I don't know, I believe it was introduced last week. And they're trying to, I guess, fast track it. So again, there is, something in the works with an attempt. Now, I don't know, again, I haven't read it myself. I just heard about it, I think Thursday or Friday last week. So we'll see, if that offers some protections, from certain businesses and institutions from liability related to the virus. On for your question, it is difficult for associations in trying to balance the protection of privacy and the protection of their residents, um, from the virus. As I said multiple times on the air, I'm still the opinion you don't give out names um, of those who are positive. Uh, you do try to, again, they have to do the best they can. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's no exposure liability because that would be a false statement. So it is difficult. I mean, I think the associations, as I've said many times, needs to let when the association finds out. I think they need to let the owners and the residents find out that someone is positive, that they instructed that person to isolate, not to use the common area, and at the end of the day, everyone, as you've said many times, sometimes you and I disagree to the extent, but that's okay. But everyone does need to look out for themselves, with the mask wearing, the social
Right.
distancing. And I've said many times, almost on the assumption that anyone that you um, come in contact with is potentially positive, except for the people that you live with. Um, and even then,
Yeah.
there's that chance too. Uh,
You know what's
and
funny? You know what's
and
funny?
and you know, and
Good.
and, and I don't know, other than that one suit down in Boca we talked about last week, and that was about disclosure of someone's name, and there was false imprisonment allegations there, and again, we'll have to see where that one goes. Um, everyone is, as we've used over and over again with this situation, unprecedented. Everyone, learning as we go. Uh, I've taken a position generally to be pretty cautious and err on the side of protecting the owners and residents the best that we can, but not to the point of disclosing names.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that part of the issue that you've got is, like you said, most people are. I think a lot of people are in the situation that I'm in. I don't. I'm 65, so I'm at the lower end of the age group that is at risk. And frankly, based on my history, I mean, I think I missed work. Now I probably went when I was contagious, but I probably missed work probably uh, for illness 2 days in the last 30 years, right? So, and that's including working a lot of Saturdays and Sundays and everything else. So I have a pretty good immune system. So I'm not too worried about it from the standpoint of myself. But I do worry about giving it to somebody who's further up in that age group, that's in their 80s or, and we've all got that. We've all got family that we're worried about. And sometimes it's extended family. Sometimes it's our in-law, or sometimes it's our daughter-in-law's grandparents or whatever. So I'm not too worried about giving it to the kids, but if you give it to the grandkids and they give it to the great grandparents, it's not a good thing. And so it's very difficult from that standpoint. And like you were talking about, it's so fluid. That's the problem. Not contagious. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's overly contagious. I'm just saying it is so fluid. So you get somebody that you were in contact with, or let's say you're tested, you come out negative, but a day later you find out that somebody was in a meeting with somebody who had it. Now are you in quarantine again? And and so I mean, I could see where literally you could be in quarantine forever at this point because it is now becoming so widespread, and there's so many people testing positive for it. It's not like it's I'm not saying, oh, we're worried about everybody dying, but I'm just saying it's spreading pretty quickly at this point. And um and so and and it seems like it's spreading to a lot of people who are asymptomatic, which is kind of scary because you find out later, as they do. The cases that I know recently were all exactly the same. The person that ended up being positive that got tested had absolutely no idea that they were positive. In one case, uh, they got tested because they were in the medical field and they were going to get the vaccine. and because they were going to get the vaccine, they had to have a negative test, and they tested positive, and they had no idea they had it, and they obviously had it for a while. So that was a situation that was just really kind of crazy. And then I had another one where kind of the same thing. They were not they got tested for some medical procedure, and had no idea they were positive. It turned out they were positive. They had no symptoms at all. In fact, if they probably hadn't got tested, they probably done the medical procedure without even having a question because they didn't have any symptoms. But so it's just those kind of things that are just making it very, very difficult to figure out if they would pass that, like you were talking about, Peter. If they get that through the legislature, still doesn't protect you on a federal level, though. Um, right? I mean,
Oh,
that law in the state is not going to. It might protect you workers' comp wise, but I'm not sure it's going to protect you legally if somebody brings a federal lawsuit for you, right?
yeah. Well, I'm not sure what. Again, to bring a federal lawsuit, you'd have to have, obviously some kind of jurisdiction to bring a federal lawsuit,
Yeah.
which is not it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. You would need some kind of diversity jurisdiction, or
Well, HIPAA.
well, yeah, but yes.
or
So
employment,
now
the Employment Act.
they were talking about, and it got all bogged down. We were talking about doing some type of federal immunity, and we all know that ended up in a fight with the with Congress. So we'll see where these immunity statutes go. Uh, I just wanted to mention that there is something in the works, at least right now at the state level.
Now, one thing I would mention for our listeners, a couple kind of positive things on this is that first of all, there is a way that you can try to find out some information. You can go on the CDC website, and they give you some general guidelines. But there is a way to, and I didn't do this. A friend of mine who's a business person did it. But you can drill down on that, and it will give you more specific situations, and then that will help you, how to handle more specific situations like we're talking about here. So that's one thing that just be aware of. And for you associations out there and property managers, maybe take a look at that and go in and take a look at the CDC website and look at some of these issues and see what's showing up. The other thing is that things are changing. There are changes to these rules, and so if you're going to follow the science, you better stay up on it because they are in effect constantly changing. For example, one of the things I didn't know had changed, but it has, is that supposedly to qualify as a contact, you have to be you had to be within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. And so a long time so all you had to do is remember anybody you had an extended conversation with that you were close up with, 6 feet. From what I understand now, it's 3 feet or less, but it's 5 minutes at a time for a total of 15 minutes. So it's not a continual 15 minutes. You could have a 5 minute conversation in the morning, go back at lunchtime, have a 5 minute conversation, go back again. So that's what they're saying. Um, the other thing is that they've redefined the quarantine period as 10 days, not 14. But they also have given some additional guidance on when that quarantine period should start, and I think it's from 72 hours from potential first contact or positive contact. But and the other thing that's kind of positive is that they're now realizing that it isn't transmitted very easily by pens and desktops and a lot of things that they were worried about before. So that's something that's good to know, is that it looks like the risk of some of this secondary contact at the pool or something else might not be as great as we thought, and it might not last as long as we thought. And so anyway, so take a look at that. That's probably something to look at for you if you've got some concerns or questions, maybe a specific situation that might be that those CDC sub guidelines, whatever you want to call them, might provide you with a little bit more direction than the overall CDC guidelines that we hear publicized. So that might be something to look at. We have a caller, Barbara. Go ahead. Welcome this morning.
Hi.
Hi.
So my condo association, like months ago, they voted at a board meeting to put out, like, around our patio pool area, put like hand sanitizer and warning signs about the virus stuff and things like that, which I guess initially, they did. But now, all snowbirds were all coming down, and there's like a big bottle of dried up hand sanitizer stuff and an old faded little piece of paper about a warning thing, and that's it. And how does somebody say, hey, you guys aren't really taking this seriously? And I don't even think they're having meetings, so I don't really know what to do.
That's a very, very good question.
Well, I mean, again, Mark was talking about the CDC guidelines, and the CDC guidelines do have guidelines in there for enhanced sanitization of the common areas. Whether it's bathrooms, things like that, especially. And I think most associations should be making some effort to do that, to follow those guidelines, to have. And I agree, not every association, has the staff and things like that. But I don't think they should just simply ignore it. And because clearly it's still out there. It's probably more prevalent now than it's ever been if you look at the numbers.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the association is necessarily going to have a $50 million lawsuit next week, but I don't think it's prudent just to throw up the hands and stop doing anything.
Barbara, your question is a very, or your point is a very good one, and your question is a very good one, because, and we talked about this a few months ago on the air, if you all of a sudden step in and start doing all of these things, and third party sanitation and putting up signs and restrictions and all of that kind of stuff, do you now create more liability for yourself if you don't do that right, or don't continue to do it like you're talking about? Is a unit owner going to say, well, gee, I thought we got this piece of paper, and I thought the association was supposedly taking, protecting us and taking actions. And then I find out that, they're not, and, that they're not, that the sanitizer's old and doesn't work, and that they're not letting us know about any of that. And they're not doing any, they're not doing any cleansing. I think to some degree, you could run a risk on that. If you kind of make people think that you're in charge and that you're doing it right, if something blows up on you, I think that there's a potential, until they do something lawsuit wise, there's a potential that this can come back on the association. And I think that I think your point is valid, Barbara. It's time. The associations need to do what yours is doing, but they need to constantly at least monitor it, and every 90 days.
Well, I don't know how to, but I mean, how do I do anything? I just got here recently, and I see it like this, and they're not having a meeting. So, and if they did, I don't know if I would even go. So I don't know what to do. How do we make the association do anything, like put up fresh hand sanitizer or whatever?
I'll tell you what will get a reaction, is the same thing that was happening at my friend's business. And that is, you send a letter to the association saying, I have concerns that I'm being exposed to risks that the association isn't taking seriously, and thus I am at risk for illness and medical problems, and that I'm concerned about that. And I guarantee you that probably is that's at least going to set it up that the association is going to have to start paying attention, because if they're smart at all and they get that to their attorney, and you may put some language in there about lawsuit type stuff, I would definitely send a letter, because it is, I mean, you're on that side, and you have a right to be concerned. So I think the associations need to not ignore this stuff. It's easy to get complacent. Fact of the matter is, we've got a lot of people down right now from up north, and they've been locked up for a long time, and they don't want to talk about locked up anymore. And so it's getting worse and worse. So, I think associations need to kind of regroup, read the current laws, look at the CDC guidelines, look at the sub guidelines, and then put in place programs that are appropriate right now, get rid of the ones that aren't, and then continue to monitor those. If you're going to be a board and take control and want to be in charge, well, then you need to be in charge right, because you're not going to be able to say, "Oh, I didn't really realize that I killed Betty up in 1203," and that and I'm kidding, but I'm not. I mean, you're going to potentially take somebody's life. I mean, we talk constantly, there's constant talk about how ridiculously stupid it was to put positive COVID patients back in with nursing home people, right? What's the difference between putting positive COVID patients in a high-rise condominium association where you're in constant contact with everybody? I mean, come on. Isn't it the same thing? I mean, aren't those the type of situations that we have the most risk on? Elderly people in close quarters? Yes. So I think that the associations need to recognize that to protect themselves, they need to at least take minimum precautions, even if that is sometimes as simple as just reminding people to wear masks, putting that sign up on the door that says, that when you come in, we would like you to wear your mask. We'd like you to stay 6 feet apart. Those kind of things, and even maybe saying, if you've got if you've been in contact with somebody who's tested positive, please quarantine, please, stay out of the common areas and all that kind of thing. So that at least you're taking positive action. Then when you get sued, because you will, but then when you get sued, at least you'll be somewhat protected to say, hey, look, I took every action that I reasonably could. It wasn't perfect, but there was no way to be perfect, but that's my feeling. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think that the association should strive to follow those policies. Follow the CDC policies. I do believe in putting up the signs, quite frankly. If your common areas are going to be open, and many are closed and are still closed, reminding people to mask, social distance. Also putting up a sign, that use areas that, quite frankly, at own risk. That COVID-19 is out there. But I don't think the association ever even hint that they're ensuring anyone's safety.
Right.
Okay. And that goes beyond COVID-19. That goes just for security in general. Never make any kind of assurances of security, because you simply can't, and don't make any assurances clearly of this thing. But I agree with Mark that if you're going to, start with hand sanitizer or sanitization, you just can't can't wave a white flag on it.
Yeah.
Again, it's that fine line. Do I think you're exposing yourself to liability if you make a good faith effort to follow the CDC guidelines on the sanitization? No, I think it's worse if quite frankly, in my opinion, if you do nothing.
Yeah.
But like anything else, again, you have to make that effort. In my view.
And here's the thing. I don't think you can disclose a person's. You can't disclose that a person has it unless that person discloses it. So as soon as the person,
right,
it makes public that they have it, then they're no longer provided the protection under the HIPAA law, because they made the disclosure. If somebody dies from the coronavirus, again, that may be a little different situation. It's different if you have it on an ongoing basis. It may be different in terms of disclosure if somebody died from it. You may be able to, you may be able to get that information. That information may be public knowledge. It um, may be shared with a family member, that a family member shared it, and one of the things, and this is kind of maybe a little touchy, but I would say right now there are too many positive stories out there of people who get the virus, are asymptomatic, and everything goes well, and 2 days later they're feeling fine and nothing happens. So what does that tell the people that are out there that are trying to, be, well, I don't need to worry about it. It looks like most people aren't getting anything anyway. I hate to say it, but we need a few of the tales of people who have died from it to come out. People start
Well,
getting real serious.
there's been a lot. There's been a lot, at least from what I've been watching.
No, but what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, Peter, is in your association.
Oh,
Somebody you're close to, somebody that you know directly.
I tend to agree with that because we talk about this a lot at home with
Right.
my wife, and she thinks that a lot of these people who just keep poo-pooing it and keep downplaying it just haven't had anyone they know
Right.
been affected. We have.
Right.
Okay. I mean, like I said, I think I said before, I know one person who has died, and another close friend of mine, her cousin died. And I know people who've gotten very sick. Fortunately, but they recovered. And oftentimes, right, it's just if you don't see it in your own experience,
Right.
then it's not real.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think you're right that maybe we do need, okay, I misunderstood what you said, but you're right. I mean, many people, again, who just don't think there's anything there because they just personally
don't know anybody.
Haven't really seen it yet.
Yeah. So I think it's, and like I say, I'm as we've talked over the months here, I'm a big proponent of letting people decide and being responsible, and they need to take actions. But at the same time, people have to have a lot of information. And if they're going to make good decisions, they have to have information to make good decisions, which means that they have to have information about the current CDC guidelines. They need to have information about what they need to do to protect themselves. And frankly, they have to know what happens when you don't. That this isn't just something that's being made up, that it's, that there's nobody that's really dying from it because you don't know anybody that's dying from it. And so, I think it's important for people that have experienced it, because it's horrible, and have had a family member, a loved one that's died from it, particularly if it's somebody that's a resident of your association. It's important for people to understand what happens, and to know somebody personally, because it's different. I might be, one way, saying, okay, I'm going to do this, but if my best friend ends up dying from it, and it's like I said the other day, how would you like to be the person that they traced back the contact to that resulted in your grandmother, best friend, or family member dying? Well, you don't want to be that person. You don't intend to be that person, but you don't even want to be that person by accident. So I think it's kind of important to make sure that we share realistic information. Don't be sharing, well, I heard a cousin of a sister of a distant relative from, second cousin twice removed had it. That's not what we're talking about. But, Aunt Betty died, or, Jane in Unit 3, got sick and barely made it, or almost or died. Those kind of things. I think it's important. Again, you got to be careful of the HIPAA situation, though, because that is an issue, and this has protection because it's a contagious disease. There are concerns under the HIPAA law of protections for the person that might be a carrier, that things don't happen to them. So anyway, well, it's so I just wanted to air that out a little bit. We talked a lot about it last week, but it's kind of funny because this is becoming more and more the concern, or the discussion. And I think it is going to be more of a problem. I think there's going to be more exposure because the economic side of this thing is that most of these businesses can't make it any longer. And so they have to try to find a way to be open. And so we're going to see more we're going to see more exposure. I mean, I just, you know, many people are looking at this and saying, well, you know, if I stay inside and close down another month, I'm just not going to reopen. It's just not worth it. I'd have to put too much of my own money that I don't have at risk, and that's a problem I've got right now too. The banks have pulled off financing wise, and have kind of pulled out of some of these markets and gotten very, very tight. So some of these businesses that may need a little working capital aren't going to get it. Um, so they're going to end up, probably closing down, laying people off, um, and or treating them as independent contractor and taking all their benefits away. So, um, but so anyway, so that's kind of where we're looking at. The other thing is, speaking of that, is that you probably want to be cognizant of the fact that, at least as far as health insurance is concerned, and if you're an association that provides health insurance to your employees, or a property manager that provides health insurance, there's no way that all of this stuff isn't going to increase the cost of health insurance. Insurance companies have paid out a ton of money. Now, they've gotten some reimbursement, but they have paid out a ton of money on this stuff, and they're going to pass that along in terms of higher premiums. You can bet on that. So make sure you're aware of that as you're coming up in your next budget year, that you may see an increase in your insurance costs because of what's going on. Just like right now, we're seeing an increase in homeowners insurance costs on HOAs. It's the point right now that if you have a house that's 15 years old or older, it's almost impossible to get coverage, any kind of reasonable coverage for it. The deductibles are ridiculous. There's no discounts. Doesn't make any difference what you do. They're just carte blanche excluding those houses. You can have impact glass, and you can have 4-point inspection, wind mitigation, and all kinds of stuff, and it's still not making a difference if your house is over 15 years old. So, so that's something to be aware of as well. We'll probably see some increases on some of this stuff. Otherwise, I think the other thing that Barbara brought up, and I'm gonna jump on it a little bit, because I still think, I don't think there's any reason at this point not to have meetings. Now, you might not have a bunch of in-person meetings, but I think at this point, we've figured out how to handle Zoom meetings and all of that kind of thing. And I think if associations start saying, they can't afford to do Zoom, or they don't know how to, that I don't think that can be an excuse at this point. You can handle those meetings pretty easily. You may need some technical assistance, but they've made it kind of easy. Even people like me can figure it out. It's maybe time to start looking at all that, because we got elections coming up. We got budget meetings that have already passed, but we got elections coming up, and I don't think it's going to be acceptable for boards to just say, we're not having a meeting, so we're just going to continue on. That isn't going to work. I think we're going to see some lawsuits on that. And
Well, I agree. Yeah, I agree that the pandemic should not be, or cannot be, used as an excuse for boards to remain in power and not have elections. I also think boards, I agree with you to the extent that they need to have board meetings. They need to have their board meetings. And vis-a-vis Zoom conference calls, whatever platform they can do to get participation and attendance from the membership. I don't think this is an excuse to not have meetings.
Yeah, but I've already heard a couple that have, we can't, so we're gonna.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, people are going to stay in office. So we're in office, but
and I'm look, some have more difficulty than others, because of technology or the size of the community. But I agree that you have to make at least a good faith effort to have the meetings.
Yeah,
not necessarily in person, because I don't want to, going back to the other conversation, I don't want to unnecessarily put people at risk. Okay, but at least remotely.
Yeah. And and you can do that. You can control that. It won't cost you much to get somebody to to show you how to do it the first time and set it up. Especially if you're doing a big meeting, you can control it. You can still give people the opportunity to speak, but they don't have. I think the interesting thing is I think a lot of associations are finding out that the Zoom meetings are much easier to manage because they have to be scheduled and they have to let people in and let people out, and so there's much more control over the meeting, and that's a plus. It's always been a problem with meetings is too little or too much control. So this is it's more organized and more timely, uh, but it is good to be able to you got to have these things and make it available. And like I said, some of these actions, we talked about some of the things the association can do to protect itself from the COVID lawsuits. I think one of the things that the associations can do is communicate, get information out to people, telling them what the current rules are, so they know. And then, second of all, go ahead and ask the members. Not everything has to be uh, in the form of a formal vote. You can do surveys. You can send out information electronically. You could have a meeting, a duly called meeting, where you in effect have a workshop via Zoom, and people can ask questions, and you can provide information. You can get feedback from people as to what they think should be done or not done. You can communicate with them what the current guidelines are and what you're being told by your legal counsel and people that are advising you. By the way, that is uh, uh, a opportunity to avoid a lawsuit is if you relied on a professional, especially in a not-for-profit corporation. So if you call in a medical professional to give you some advice as to what you should do in your association, you call in your attorney to give you some advice as to notifications, what you can notify, what you can't. um, that's going to go a long way if you do have a lawsuit, because you at least relied on that professional guidelines and that professional guidance, because they don't expect you to be an expert in COVID, and they don't expect you to be an attorney. So that if you've got that, that could be a really good thing. And that, you know, we buy insurance, spend a little money on one meeting and at one professional, and it's probably worth it. So anyway, so those are some of the things that I think we should be looking at. Um, and then the I guess the other thing I would mention, Peter, kind of off changing direction a little bit, but talking about planning, I'm really concerned about the financial side of business right now. The how tight all the money is and how difficult everything is, and we've got a lot of stuff that is going to affect associations. For example, I mean, I don't know what the number is now, but they're saying like what is 50 million people. 50 million people nationwide are at least 3 months behind on their rent, and currently can't be evicted. But and it's fine to say we're going to forgive that. We're not going to let them be evicted, and we're going to forgive their rent payment. But the landlord, the person who owns the unit, they're not getting their stuff forgiven. All of those loans that they've got, all of the taxes and costs that they have, they're not getting that forgiven. So, you know, what you're going to have is a bunch of these units potentially um, going into some sort of foreclosure or abandonment. Even worse, maybe some abandonments. So I think associations need to kind of look at this and allow for it, because there's a financial housing crisis that's on the edge right there that needs to be considered. Um, there's a big shift right now. We've talked about people coming down from up north, and they are buying, but there is also a big shift nationwide to people who are not buying anymore. They're renting, and they have no intention of. And this is all ages. And I read an article a while back that was talking about that. A lot of the millennials don't buy because they don't know where they're going to be. They don't know that they want to lock in because they don't know how long they're going to be at that location. And then their parents or, their parents are looking at staying somewhere close to them. Maybe they're retired and they want to, they want to be close to the grandkids, but they don't want to buy something because the kids aren't sure that they're not going to be moving. So, and a lot of these, the older people who would normally own the homes and condos are starting to look at, well, maybe I'll just rent. So that's something that's going on out there. But I'm, like I said, worried that the banking industry right now, it may be very difficult to get loans. So it may be one of those kind of things where, and I've advised business the same thing, is to go out and get a line of credit, even if you don't need it, especially if you don't need it, because that's when you can get it. Go ahead and get a line of credit, have it ready just in case. And if things start to get bad, draw on it so that, that they can't cancel it. We had that same thing happen in 07 and 08. And the businesses that had their lines and thought they were protected but hadn't drawn on them, they lost them because the bank sent them a letter saying, oh, by the way, you haven't been using your line of credit, so we're cutting it in half. So they won't do that if you have it drawn on. So anyway, I would, if you're in a situation, maybe you think you're going to have something coming up. For example, let's say you've got roof replacement coming up, or you've got some big reserve item coming up, and you're concerned that you may not have enough money for that. And you maybe you were thinking about, I'll do a special assessment. You may want to have a backup plan to be able to borrow on in case you look at the special assessment and your unit owners can't afford to pay. Some of those members may be in a situation where if there's a lot of vacancies, a lot of units for sale, they're not going to want to pay a special assessment for the person who can't pay. So, kind of like we were in 2007, 2008, 2009. So keep that in mind. If you're looking at if you've got a big project coming up and you were planning on doing it with a special assessment or assessment, you may want to look at going to a bank and arranging a line of credit just in case. And don't wait until you need it. Go ahead and do it now. Plan it out ahead. And then if you don't need it, it might have just cost you a small fee. But otherwise, you'll be prepared if all of a sudden, 20% of your unit owners say, well, I can't really pay the special assessment. I just don't have the cash right now. So that we still got to be aware of what it takes to run the association on a daily basis and what needs to be done from a reserve standpoint. So anyway, that's just some cautions I've got financially that we need to look at going into the new year, I think, and something to keep in mind. Other than that, Peter, we're almost out of time, but anything you wanted to add to this before we kind of close it out here pretty quickly?
No, although I do know that banks are still loaning. So, so money is available to associations as far as I know.
Yeah, that is true. To associations, and right now they are, and that's why I'm saying it's probably a good idea to take advantage of it, because 6 months or a year from now, banks start experiencing some other losses. They may not be as eager to loan money out, and it might not be available, and it might be expensive too. That's the other thing; it could be expensive money. So, there are talking about the potential for significant increases in interest rates. So, anyway, well, hopefully we helped you out a little bit. We'll be back here next Monday from 9 to 10 o'clock to either help you out or confuse you more. And we do that every Wednesday. We do that every Monday for ever and ever. So feel free to join us. If you like the show, tell your friends. If you don't, keep your mouth shut. And otherwise, we appreciate you joining us here on Condo Solutions every Monday morning, 9 to 10 o'clock, right here on WSTU Digital 1450 for Martin County's Heritage Station.